most moving parts to me of the first half, I think it's chapter 15, where he meets Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, who's a child of Johann Sebastian. And just the way he wrote about it, like, I thought, okay, that's cool, he met someone famous, but he writes about it with such emotion, and I felt it, because I'm, I don't know if all music people are like this, but the goosebumps and the just the joyful feeling in your heart, your soul, wherever it lands, if you're an emotional musician or music person. And he writes about it so beautifully that it wasn't just, he felt very honored because this was a famous musician, but he also felt just the warmness of a good person and the absolute thrill that an amazing musical experience gives you. And that, of all of the parts that struck me, that's, in some ways, that's the most memorable, because I really identified with that. Like, I have experiences like that with playing music with friends, or that are just absolutely emotionally engulfing and completely speak to your heart. And I felt that when the way he describes his experiences with Bach. It was the honor, but it was a genuine, just beautiful moment. It really struck me there.
So it was interesting to read that, because he talks about Bach as he's the only Bach.
Yeah, right? It's true.
Whereas when I think of Bach, the first Bach I think of is J.S. Bach.
Yes.
Right, but J.S. Bach had died at that point, and for quite a few years, and C.P. Bach was the Bach, the Bach at that time, right? Yeah. So that was kind of interesting, and he did really, really like. I wonder if it's because Bach was warm towards him and took him seriously. Like, I don't know. He doesn't really talk about how people reacted to him being blind at all.
It's true. He doesn't. That's very interesting. I know he gives these little anecdotes now and then that relate to his blindness, but he almost, I don't think so far he's ever mentioned that how anyone in the public reacts to him specifically.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. I want to talk a bit about his getup, his clothing, because you don't hear about this until many chapters in, and he's described harrowing types of travel where you're traveling overnight on the mail coach and they got lost in the snow and they're trying to ford this river, and anyone, he says this very in a flip way, like, anyone who's traveled more than 25 miles knows that there's going to be danger. And I was like, 25 miles. So I just did that, yesterday in a car. But he talks about these travels, and then many chapters in, he describes this outlandish getup that he wore. And I think someone wanted him to, but it's layers and layers and layers, and a cap, and then a visor, and then a hat, and then a hood, and then a blanket, and then an outrageous... Yes. It sounded like swaddling clothes, frankly. Like, how did you move in all those clothes? And he framed it as, I'm someone who's always cold. Okay, well, but as a blind... I just felt that as a blind person, he was being sort of swaddled and wrapped up, and it was very alarming. And then he describes how he's in a coach, and they stopped at an inn, and everyone else went in for schnapps, and he didn't go in, which I kind of related to. Sometimes on a car trip, you're like, it's just more trouble to get out of the car.
He was fairly young at that time.
He was, yeah, it's true. But he stayed in the coach waiting, and they didn't tie the horses up, and so the horses just started taking off, and he must have been terrified. And he was in this getup where he could barely move. And so it's this weird combination of, like, a curious, adventurous person, but then he's swaddled in this outfit that somebody eventually got him to
I think his
stop
sister,
wearing.
I think we'll find out. Oh. Well, it was interesting because he called it his armor.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be, he did say something about, he thought that the parents have to stop coddling their children, essentially is what he said. So I don't know, I've not looked into if they tended to overdress their children and overdress them if they were blind. I don't know.
Yeah, as a protection.
But there was something about how parents nowadays, him being 32, didn't do that with their children as much.
Okay.
So there might
maybe it was a norm.
A couple of things, but I think that he had so many layers. I think there was something extra there because he was blind, right? Yeah. Swaddling him is a good word.
Yeah, that's how it felt. And I thought it was odd that it took him, 17 chapters to explain that. He'd already given tons of detail about his travel experiences, and then all of a sudden you find out he was wrapped up like a dumpling.
Well,
a strange getup.
It really, it was. When I'm reading about it, holy moly. Like, a lot of it was wool and stuff, layers upon layers of layers. But yeah, I think we're going to find more about that, or at least I think it's his sister that is that.
He said a female, maybe it was his sister.
I think it's going to be a sister. Okay. We'll find out if I'm right.
Yeah.
In the second half, because we'll have to do this again when the second half.
Because I think it ends up being his sister who travels with him, which it must be after his father dies, because all of his travels are with his father as
up to now. Yeah.
And so I think his sister becomes his guide and assistant.
Yeah.
Later in life, so I can't wait to hear how that shifts.
Yeah, how that shifts. Yeah, that'd be very interesting. So one of my former students who just finished her master's and I are working on his flute duets right now. We were going to record them. So I thought you might want to hear just a little bit. This is just a little recording we did. It's not a real recording yet. That comes later. But let's just listen to this for a sec. To play, it's really fun. What do you think about listening to it?
I'm curious where it fits into his, like, is that more Baroque?
Oh no,
that's more later.
Yeah, this is later stuff. Okay. His early pieces, as far as I can understand, are not available. Like a lot of people, they didn't publish their works, or they wrote things down and they were just lost. Apparently they were sometimes used as, like, you know how they take, what is it, in a butcher shop, they used to always put newspaper around your cut of beef or whatever. I think they sometimes used old sheet music for that. I've heard about that.
Can you imagine?
I know, right? So there are a lot of lost pieces by his. So we're lucky we have any at all, really. But as a flutist, it's very interesting to play it, because he's very good at the back and forth kind of conversation between the two of you, which would make sense to him, because he doesn't want to just be melody or harmony, because his interaction would just be musically. He can't see the audience or see the people in his group. He can only contact them through his music.
One of the things that when I play music with friends pretty often, and there's a kind of back and forth where you're playing a song and then someone might improvise a little solo in the middle, and sometimes someone will say, "So Chris, let's hear you on the melodica," during the song. But I know that there's sort of a visual language of, I'm sure there's kind of a visual language of, like, here, and then it's your turn to do a solo. And so do you think that the way performance happened then was very scripted, or do you think there was a spontaneity to the back and forth?
Definitely a spontaneity to the back and forth. There has to be. There's body movements. There's like flick of the eyes, like a little, like looking aside or looking at each other. Actually, eye contact. And sometimes, but so taking that part out. Sometimes when you're playing and you hear the other person swelling, getting louder, you get louder with them. So it's on many different levels, this interaction. So, I mean, he does lose that one level, being blind. But again, he might concentrate and work on the other level and hear more things than I might, because I'm watching for the eye, the look of the eye, or the movement of the body, or the intake of the breath, or whatever. So, well, you can hear the intake of the breath. But
I have a friend who I sing with, and she often refers to the fact that she'll watch my lips to follow if she doesn't know all the words. But she joins in immediately when I start singing. And I said, "You must be watching my breath, because you start exactly when I start." And so there's clearly a subtle visual language of this. And I'm so interested to hear you say that, because to me, Baroque and classical music is 100% scripted. Like I imagine it as completely proscribed, that there's a set thing that you follow, and if you don't follow it perfectly, you failed. And so that's really interesting to me to hear that this style of music also happened in kind of a jam way, a spontaneous way.
Within the parameters of what's written, yes.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Like when you're playing something, like there's this part where we've got these triplets, and then we've got this little tiny time for a breath. So we both know we're going to take that little breath there, so we can get through the next phrase, right? So if she took a breath here and I took a breath over here, it wouldn't work as well. So there's definitely, I mean, everything is scripted. You've got all the notes. It's telling you where to get loud, where to get soft. In the Baroque, they didn't really do that. We leave it up to editors now. They'll put the additions in, so they think, oh, this should be soft, this should be loud.
Oh.
So there's a certain amount of things you can do to Baroque music. For example, is Glenn Gould. You know who Glenn Gould is?
The pianist. Yeah.
Pianist. So he, what can I say about Glenn Gould? He was visionary in many ways. I don't know a lot about him, but I've heard some of his playing, and a lot of people didn't like how he played because he would reinvent it in a way. There's a time when he played, was it a Brahms piano concerto, I think it was, with Leonard Bernstein was the conductor, and Bernstein kind of had to do a little disclaimer at the beginning, like, kind of like, you're going to hear Glenn Gould, he's amazing, but this is not what I would, how I would play it, kind of thing. So, we don't really know how much liberty people took back then necessarily, but you had to follow the notes and the rhythm. You had that. And by the classical era, they were putting all the other stuff in the articulation, like slurring and tonguing and accents, and they had more control over how you played it, and it got more and more, like, through the Romantic era, the composer wanted more control over how the person would play it. But not like jazz where you just kind of make up stuff. And I'm sorry, any jazz musician, you're not just making up stuff.
Oh, the jazz musicians like that.
No, you have 12 bars blues. Bill, my brother, talked all about that, and you work within those 12 bars and you create your thing. But in music, you've got things written in those 12 bars. But still within that, I can play those 12 bars in many different ways. I can make it sound happy. I can make it sound sad. I can do staccatos. I can do, you know what I mean? If it's not written in, I have some freedom there. But we usually, when we look at this stuff, we go by the conventions of the time. We know that in the Baroque era, they didn't have these grandiose crescendos and decrescendos, so we don't put them in, or we shouldn't put them in.
And it makes me wonder about what made a good musician. So it sounds like in the Baroque era, a good musician was someone who was technically perfect, whereas later in the classical era, maybe it was someone who had enough fluidity to express emotion. Can you express emotion in Baroque?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but not in the same way, not as openly as you can in classical romantic music, I would say. I'm not sure that's true, but it's because it was so different music, different eras, different thought processes of the society at the time, right? The community that you were in. That's a whole other discussion for classical romantic, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and we're so accustomed, like we live in an age of documentation. Everyone documents everything, and it's challenging and simultaneously, really interesting to think about and imagine yourself into a time where there was some documentation, but not in any way the way. And so I'm taking your image of the butcher paper that's got musical scores on it. I'll be thinking about that for a while because how much have we lost? But then it gives us this, like, maybe in the attic in Berlin somewhere, there's a whole concerto
they found some Vivaldi. 8 years ago, 9 years ago, they found a couple of Vivaldi concertos in somebody's attic.
Amazing. Yeah.
I think it was 2019. They found some letters from Clara Schumann to her students' parents, so we know a little bit about that exchange. It's kind of interesting. So they are still finding things, which is interesting. It's very interesting, although they're not going to find the butcher paper stuff. That's gone forever.
That ship has sailed. One of the most exciting things to me about this project is that we're going to hear music eventually. We're going to hear music played out loud for people that hasn't been heard in centuries.
Yeah, that's true.
that is so, because in Vienna, one of the things you want to do is look in the archives, right, of things
Absolutely.
that are only available there, things that have not been seen the light of day maybe for a long time, and
Correct.
music that has not been heard possibly by anyone alive today.
Yeah.
That's a bizarre, exciting idea.
Well, when I first started studying, looking up Dülon, I went on YouTube to see what was there, right? There are two things. Where I got the first movement of concerto, this place in Stuttgart called Cornetto Music, I think it's called, and very, very pleasant gentleman who I dealt with getting this, very nice guy, and they have a 30-second snippet of this because somebody went there and took this first movement and created a piano part for it out of all the orchestral parts, right? So what I played was piano and flute, but it's really written for a small orchestra. And so there's a little snippet of it there, and then there's this one duet of one of his viola and flute duets on YouTube, and that's all that's out there. Whereas look up Mozart and you can find 16,000 and 58 million YouTube things out there. Yeah. So it's so niche and it's so unknown that it's very exciting.
Yeah, the idea that just this music has never been heard by anyone alive today, that's
pretty
wild.
Cool. Yeah, pretty wild. And there's other musicians out there, I mean, that we don't know their music enough, but that's what this whole podcast is going to be about ultimately. Once I'm going to still put in some other people in between talking about Dülon and von Paradis, because there's so much great music out there we don't know about yet.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And so my interest is in the stories and in the music too, but not in as a technical way, but I love the idea of bringing to light the untold stories, particularly of people with whom I have this in common, that we're both blind and musicians, and the stories of blind people living and doing exciting things and just living our lives, and how that's not necessarily something that got documented either. So I'm very excited to be in a position to research where did they live, where did they perform, what did they do, what was their city, how did they travel, and so my excitement is to go to those places, research, learn, take it all, just absorb, and then to try to create some fictionalized stories based on what their lives might have been like.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. It would be amazing if we had a video of, Dülon playing somewhere. I mean, maybe we'd be shocked. I don't know.
Right?
What
don't we know?
What don't we know?
We never know?
What will we never know? Yeah, that's the thing.
What don't we know? We don't know.
Yeah. So we were kind of we can only grab at certain things and try and get the information out of this and do the best we can. But it's absolutely fascinating to me, and I know to you as well.
The autobiography is just such compelling reading.
That's a gift. It's a gift having his autobiography.
Right?
Right? It really is.
His own words and his own... his own perspectives on stuff. Super. I can't wait for the second half.
Yeah, me neither. All right, so I think we're gonna call it a wrap for today, and Chris, we'll have you on many more times.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited for our work together.
And we will. It'll be a few months before we go to Europe, and when we're there, we will also do some podcasts from there, because
why wouldn't we?
Why wouldn't we? Right. So when next time we get together, I think we should talk about Maria von Paradis and introduce her.
Yes.
Right? So here we've been doing all this talking just about the autobiography. Here's a picture of Dülon. Right? So this is what he looked like. It's the only picture that I can find of him. It's like it's like a pencil drawing of him, or whatever it would have been back then. And it's not a portrait, but he did talk about a portrait being made of him for C.P. Bach. C.P. Bach had all these portraits of all these musicians and everything, and I don't know where that one went. I haven't been able to find that. It's lost somewhere. Maybe it's in somebody's house,
attic,
or
in someone's wall. It's just
and nobody knows.
Wall. I don't know.
I know
how much we want to know it.
Exactly. I want to see that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so with that, we will say goodbye, and we'll see you soon.